Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
And that was your warning. And now we can begin.
And this is just into our newsroom. Police have arrested a sex offender wanted in California, here in Las Vegas. And wait until you check out this mugshot. See all those tattoos? Wasn't too hard to find him. This is Martin G. Suarez. He's a registered sex offender wanted for a parole violation. He was just taken into custody since he was 14 years old. He's been arrested more than 35 times in California.
It's arresting a convicted child predator less than a year after he was paroled.
Robert Sohn was charged last Tuesday by the Livingston County prosecutor with second-degree criminal sexual conduct of a child under 13, the same crime that sent him to prison for 5 years.
Robert Sohn had not registered as a sex offender, as was part of his parole. In fact, he was befriending neighbors, including children, and none of them had any idea who he was.
Have learned a convicted sex offender is on the run, accused of another sexual assault of a minor while on parole. Well, that's right. 36-year-old Christopher Law is a fugitive from justice, facing serious new charges here in Utah. Trying to figure out how and why he had unsupervised access to a minor as a convicted child sex offender. Christopher Law's entry on Utah's sex offender registry shows he is non-compliant. Location unknown. Law pleaded guilty to aggravated sexual abuse of a child in 2010. He served 10 years of a 6-to-life sentence before Utah's Board of Pardons and Parole granted him release in 2020. Here's what he told the board before his release.
I'm willing to do whatever it takes to reintroduce myself into society and prove that I can be a productive member.
Law is now charged with raping a minor last month while still on parole. According to court documents, when confronted by a witness on June 24th, Law said he, quote, couldn't help himself.
Convicted rapist Benjamin Laguerre is back in custody less than a month after he was paroled. The state parole board says that Laguerre violated the conditions of his release, even after being warned. He was sentenced to life for the 1984 rape and robbery of a neighbor.
This is 31-year-old Daniel Langdon. This, too, is Daniel Langdon, as is this. Pictures Toronto police say he altered to appear younger on social media. After a lengthy and ongoing investigation, police have charged Langdon with 96 sexual offenses involving multiple underage victims since April 2021.
One alleged incident involved a 7-year-old victim who was sexually assaulted at a Toronto park.
Toronto police had previously warned the public about Langdon in 2016 when he was arrested and eventually convicted of charges related to child pornography. According to court records accessed by Global News, he was sentenced to 2 years less a day in jail and put on the National Sex Offender Registry for life. But the registry, which can only be accessed by police, is just a list. And once offenders are released from jail, they're often not tracked.
That's really the problem here, is we don't know how to address this type of behavior. You never stop having a sexual interest in children. It needs to be managed properly.
Today, when he appeared in court, ladies, he was actually sentenced to 4 years of prison for that probation violation back in 2022. Prosecutors say Jared Wright, born and raised in Akron, Ohio, has a long history of inappropriate relationship with teens that dates back to him being 16 years old. Back in 2017, Wright ran away with a younger girl while he was also involved with another girl who was just 14, and her family took out a restraining order against him. And 2 years later, he moved to Florida, where he allegedly met a 15-year-old girl on social media. After allegedly going to her house, her parents also filed a restraining order. Then in 2021, when Wright was 20, he was arrested by police in the Akron area after being accused of trying to have sex with an underage cousin while hiding in a relative's home. Days after his arrest there, Wright was released, got on a Greyhound bus, and came to Cincinnati. And that's when prosecutors say he met up with a then 15-year-old girl who he also met on social media. For 3 weeks, he lived with the teen in her bedroom basement of her family's College Hill home without her family knowing. Prosecutors say during that time, sexual contact occurred. Wright was arrested while hiding under the victim's bed. Initially, he was charged with rape, but pleaded guilty to 3 counts of gross sexual imposition and illegal use of minor and nudity-oriented material. As part of his guilty plea, he was ordered to serve 3 years of probation while receiving treatment at the Talbot House Turtle Creek Center. But in October, the judge says he left the facility without her approval. Wright's lawyer, James Moore, explained to the judge his client's reasoning for leaving the program. Judge Jennifer Branch sentenced Wright to 4 years in prison with 549 days served.
Do you think that was fair? I'll have to reserve my comments on that one.
Found a troubling number of registered sex offenders not complying with state requirements.
Today, now, federal and state law enforcement officers set a goal to check in with 1,000 offenders. They say that 20% were not in compliance with the conditions that are required of people on the sex offender registry.
Okay. You're charged with forceful rape. Just give me a brief rundown of what went on in this crime.
Well, I was going with a white girl. She was my girlfriend. And I had another girlfriend that was a white girl. And me and her was fooling around. She got upset because I didn't rush ejaculation on her and try to get back to my girl. And she got mad and grabbed my penis and put her fingernails in it and snatched hard, you know what I'm saying? She wouldn't want to let go. And I slapped her. And she said, what I'm gonna tell my mom, my stepfather? I told her, I said, you can tell them what you want. You know what I'm saying? You did that, not me. You know what I'm saying? But she left and they came to the house and picked me up for it.
Okay, looking at the arrest report, the story very much different from what you're trying to tell me. It said you jumped in a car, took her to a building, you raped her, you kicked her, you tried to halfway break her neck, and then a few days later, you and a friend tried to sell her graduation ring, and you were identified as the person trying to sell her ring with her name on it. Why did y'all stories differ so much?
She admitted that she consented to the sex in the trial, and the lawyer came in and said they're gonna offer you 15 years, and I said, I said for the part I did taking, for the part that I did taking the ordeal, I said, I accept full responsibility for my actions, you know. And she stand up again and said that she consented to the sex like that. And I said, I can't do nothing but what y'all asked. You know, then they said, well, we trying to offer you 30 years. Would you take the 30 years? My mom and them told me not to take the 30 years because the girl consented to the sex.
Mr. Howard, I've got a couple of questions. I don't want to dwell heavily on facts, but I do want to ask you a couple of questions about that.
Yes, sir.
You indicate that you were in the middle of a trial. Is that right, when you took your plea?
Yes, sir. I was in the middle of the trial.
You keep saying that the victim said this was consensual sex. The victim actually testified in a trial and told the judge and a jury that this was consensual?
Yes, sir. It's all on the record. I got the paperwork too. She's consented to the sex. She stated to the record, she stated for everybody in there that she consented to the sex.
Well, did you know this lady before that particular day?
Yes, sir. She had been to the house all the time, coming to my mom's house too.
She took the stand and she said, I know this man. I've been knowing this man all this time, and my sex was consensual, and you and your lawyer pled guilty? It doesn't make much sense to me.
The lawyer told me to plead guilty.
You know, part of what we are here today, Mr. Howard, we don't really litigate the old facts, but if someone is being dishonest and not telling the truth, that goes a long way with me. I can't speak for the rest of the board. So I'm having trouble believing what you're telling me now. So is that your story? Is that what you're sticking to? You say this lady actually took the stand and said this sex was consensual, and I've known this man for a long time?
Yes, sir. She said to
in the courtroom.
In the courtroom, they asked her, did she consent to the sex? And she said, yes, she consented to the sex.
Is that because you had a knife on her or something like that?
I didn't have no gun. I didn't have no knife.
You didn't hurt her in any way?
I slapped her.
So, it makes you think, What makes you think? What makes you think is, so why is it that Measy chose this DC, this fucking thing? Why does this DC stand out further than the rest? And the thing is, it's not because of Justice DC. It's really because, you see, the victim, the survivor, the woman, the Wahine, Miss Morton's is here, and it is because of this Wahine, the woman, the survivor, the victim, Miss Morton's, burns this fucking creature back into its cell. And in this universe, it is not just a most splendid, but a most powerful thing.
Ms. Martin, I know it's been difficult for you to hear what you've heard. If you'll unmute your microphone and tell us what you'd like us to hear.
Well, first of all, I want to say that everything coming out of his mouth is lies. He is delusional. I've never, ever met him. I've never been to his house. And as a matter of fact, I've never in my life had any relations with any African-American man. I did not know him.
So now that we know the Wahine is here, we get to find out two things. The first is what actually happened that night, and the reason. The reason of what? Well, that would be the second thing. The reason why this fucking thing and all those things like it should never be granted parole.
I was hanging out with a girlfriend of mine and her boyfriend. And because I was the third wheel, I volunteered to go pick up cigarettes and ice cream. He jumped in my car, told me he had a gun, and made me drive, and made me get out of my car, where he raped me. And then he beat me half to death. And I know he was trying to kill me. He tried several times to break my neck. He got off my back and started kicking me in the face. And if I hadn't held my breath and played dead long enough to get the adrenaline to get up, I would be dead.
So that's exactly what he did. That is exactly what she survived. That is the reason why he's in prison. And the very fucking reason why he should never get fucking paroled. When it comes to punishment and justice, with that scale, you also have to add on top of that all of the fucking trauma that Miss Martins has gone through. And then you have to add on top of that all of the trauma her whānau, her extended whānau, and all of her friends did too. And that's a good place to look at balancing the scales of punishment well before it gets to the parole.
I was 19 when that happened. I am about to be 45 this year, and I still have nightmares. I still have problems dealing with this. It will never go away. It changed me forever. He is a filthy, nasty liar. I never met him.
It is the worst thing that can affect emotion, and that word is called a trauma. And it's acts or behaviour, something which has happened, taken place, which has such a dramatic effect on the human. And when it comes to us humans, what effect a sex assault of any kind has upon a victim, we, ones that have not been sexually assaulted, it's hard for us to understand the brutality of that trauma. And that's why, with the advice Miss Morton says next to the parole board in making their decision upon paroling this sex offender, should be used with all sex offenders, and not just because it makes sense, but because it makes common sense.
And I don't think he should be allowed to be out. I know he's only got like 6 more years, but that 6 more years, he becomes older. And the older he is when he gets out of prison, the less likely he is to rape another person or try to kill or rob another person. I hope he's in jail long enough to become impotent and crippled and old and feeble. I hope he rots when he gets out. He is not safe for society, especially since he won't own his actions. He has developed his own story in his mind. He has never taken responsibility for what he did. He has never expressed remorse. He is a monster.
So now that our Wahine has slammed those cell doors shut, what possibly could this DC have to say?
Mr. Howard, is there anything else you'd like to say to the board before we vote? Mr. Howard, if you're going to speak, you need to speak to us. Do not speak to the victim at all.
All I can say is that I've been rehabilitated.
Genius.
I'm not causing any more trouble. And I want to be out with my mom because she died and I need to get out there. But if the good Lord deems it's sufficient, then let his will be done.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Appreciate your comments. Ben, ready to vote?
Yes, sir. Okay, Mr. Howard, first off, I think you, in my mind, you've been totally dishonest today. You have a terrible supervision record. You have a terrible prison record. All law enforcement are strongly opposed, as well as the victim. I would like to thank for having the courage to speak to us this morning. You cleared up a lot of things for us, and I vote to deny.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Mr. Howard, you're not ready. You're not ready. You've been completely dishonest with this board today. I don't know if you knew the victim was going to be here today to dispute things that you were saying. You have a poor supervision history before you came to prison. You've had a poor disciplinary record in prison. You refused a lot of programs. You've only completed phase 1 of sex offender treatment. There's strong victim and law enforcement opposition. And today my vote is to deny your early release.
Mr. Howard, first off, I'd like to thank Ms. Martin for the courage to be here today and to testify. Mr. Howard, I agree with everything my colleagues have said. I think you've been very dishonest with us. I don't know exactly what problems you may have, or you may have in fact convinced yourself what you believe is true. But that is not what happened. And I think that, for all of the reasons said previously, my vote is likewise to deny. So good luck to you.
The universe that we live in, to me, sometimes just seems kind of backwards. And that when we look at these worthless things getting out of prison that are coming up for parole after hurting wahine and kids that went up for that parole, that the person, the entity, the being that protects us from them the most is the one being that we all fail to protect. And that being, pre-fucking dominantly, is the wahine, the power of the wahine. Never underestimate how strong that power can be.